Planet Coaster 2 has been like when you change or upgrade your phone. It's familiar. There are new features to discover and play with. However, the muscle memory is gone, and it can take some time to rebuild it. But soon, these features will become second nature once again, and they will inspire new ideas. And the in-game scale tool, that was the final bit of inspiration for this project. Simply put, if it's difficult to make things smaller, what about making them bigger? On day one of getting the game, I started a park and started placing everything. For me, things can get lost in menus, but if they're right in front of you, it's a bit easier to visualize what you're working with. This also became a space to test out features like the custom trains, and that is where the bee-themed car began. Honestly, there is some kind of odd magic when a piece just works and creates the whole idea. That was the leaf piece that, when painted white, became an insect wing. And some more experiments later, and I had the idea of using surfboards to make flower petals and curtains for grass. And this initial testing validated the idea. But it was a future project at this point. This idea was on hold whilst I worked on other concepts and learnt the game. But it became the focus when a Diorama Contest run by Jan came around. Build a roller coaster in a small space. That was all the encouragement I needed. And yes, we're 2 for 2 on deadlines actually getting projects finished, by the way. I don't need them, but they do work. My first idea for my diorama included rides like the tilt coaster, drop coasters, which had a good visual feature, but the small footprint lent itself more in favour of compact rides like spinning coasters, Eurofighters with small trains and tight elements. And the Bee adventure coaster idea, I had been saving it for a giant park concept, but that got pared down into something more achievable, and I started working on it. I knew quite early, even before choosing the bee and garden theme, that I wanted some water element to cut through part of the diorama, so this easily became a pond. And setting the ride into one of the corners using the turntable elements, we had the start. The initial framework of where the ride is going to go, pausing to build around that, and then completing the ride with the new information. And this method was why the flying over the water section, which was originally going to happen halfway through the layout, became the first part before diving into the underground section. And the layout still went through a number of versions before the final horseshoe turn became the main focal point. And that included the challenge of actually finishing it, threading it through the track, terrain and scenery to complete the ride. But using the new unload station, I managed to make a run of block sections for more trains, and the layout was complete. Taking those initial flowers and grass, I began to make more. Using more surfboards, I managed to make a flower that worked well for both water lilies on the pond, as well as small flowers that filled the gaps with colour around the layout. And I knew early on that I would want a main statue or central element. So continuing with the garden theme, I reached out to SP Ridley, who created a garden gnome which fit perfectly. Alongside this, I created a few more items that may have been lost in the garden, which was greatly inspired by the aesthetic of Grounded, It Takes Two, and Little Big Planet. And these items allowed for more storytelling as well as giving the diorama a bit of motion. Blending the colour of the track into the surrounding terrain was another extra detail. Most roller coasters try to highlight their track, but in this case, I wanted to hide it as much as possible whilst avoiding mods. Changing the track colour and the supports to be camouflaged as roots, stems and water gave a stronger effect that the cars were moving around on their own, selling the effect. And I develop ideas by asking questions. The right questions can give interesting answers and help to find that unique spin. But the main one is, what's the point? What spin or twist can I do to make this idea mine? Asking these questions, the concept I ended up with was bees had outsourced the pollen collection to humans so that they could focus more on their technology. And this idea was influenced by the factory scenes of Bee Movie, and I felt a clean industrial environment would contrast well with the chaos of the garden above ground. So once the majority of the above ground was finished, it was time to shift my focus onto that. But it did not come without its challenges. The proximity to other elements from above limited what I could do below, which in turn meant the roof had to be sloped to avoid the trenches above, and honestly, it made it better. Challenges can make interesting solutions, most times more interestingly than if you had no limits. And this gave the queue extra space for world building and narrative, including a cassette punk-inspired control room and a workshop section for the trains, preparing them for the next flight. Shifting perspective to something new and novel is a common idea. In the same way you feel like a giant walking through a model village, it's also interesting for the world around you to become giant. Many cartoons, games and movies have explored this potential, and there is more that I want to do with this type of question. And this is not the last giant scale project I had in mind, so you'll have to stick around to see where I go with that. But for now, that's about it. Thanks for watching, and look after yourself.